Hey, happy Friday. Happy February. Deep in now. We're headed into this short month and 2025. It's shocking that we're already in month two. This is Jen Wilson here with my good friend Amy Vetter, and we are here to talk all things leadership in the profession in Leadership Lunch Chat. We're going to spend about 18 to 20 minutes with you processing usually a topic, although sometimes we find ourselves processing multiple. Today, we thought we'd talk about learning and leadership and the tie between them, and in particular, senior leader learning. Folks that are high up in an organization, owners, CEOs, managing partners, principals, service line leaders, the folks that are running organizations, association leaders, all the folks in our profession that are guiding others and guiding the strategy and guiding clients and what we're all thinking and doing related to learning. So that's what we're going to process today. And I think Amy and I came to this topic or were attracted to it because we encounter leaders who are committed to lifelong learning. And it's such a blessing to be with those leaders. And we ourselves are trying to be lifelong learners and get better continually and, attend classes and learn from others and ask questions and participate in learning activities, read, all these things. But sometimes we encounter leaders who feel a little bit like they have arrived and they aren't learning much anymore. And in an organization where we have a group of leaders that aren't learning very much or getting out there and really understanding what's happening, and they feel like I've already kind of developed my understanding of this business and clients, and I don't need to learn much more. When we encounter that, it usually points to an organization that's starting to lose its competitive advantage. That's at risk for losing that competitive advantage. And so we thought we'd just talk about mindset on learning and also like what sort of learning activities we love to see in senior leaders. And Amy, I'll let you pick it up from there.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of this quote about like when we're leaders, we need to listen as much as we speak, and when we're staff, we need to speak as much as we listen. Because what happens as we grow in our careers is we're asked to be that Google, constantly being asked questions, constantly shelling out answers right and left and up and down, and not always necessarily taking the time away and stepping back and doing the learning development that's necessary because we think we know how this works, we've been around, that sort of thing. Um, or it can be, with our colleagues that we're discussing these things all the time. So feel like we know the best way because we've been in it. But really trying to figure out like where are the areas or the spaces that can help us to grow. And some of it's CPE, but a lot of it is not. A lot of the learning that we can do, whether it be self-learning, whether it be evaluation and feedback learning, it's really important to do those things to keep expanding ourselves and really helping us to innovate new ideas. Because what happens is we really get to the space where we're an expert in what we do, and it's very hard to shift and change course because that's what we are an expert in. And so it's more than taking the time to step back and being open to the learning. It's that you're willing to step back and be open to change because that's where learning takes you, right? Like every new thing that, if I go to a training session, there's always an idea. May not be the whole training session, but something that got me that was like, this is definitely something that I need to do or my organization needs to do. How do we get there? And bringing people along with you. And so I'd probably want to start with that piece of it. I experienced being part of a workshop last week that I think they demonstrated this so well. And that's learning from your team and your future leaders. Just because we have been doing this, have been there, done that, doesn't mean we understand what it takes to get to the future. And a lot of times the learning happens behind closed doors rather than coming to your teams and saying, here are our issues. What are the biggest things that are on your mind out of these topics? And which ones are you willing to help us brainstorm and come up with how to address it, attack it, and be a part of the solution? And so much learning comes when that happens, when we're open to other perspectives, because there's so many things that we can't think of because we are not that generation. We're not exposed to the same things. We're not used to the same kind of tools or the same types of working. So it is really important that we're not always going to learn from an expert. We're going to learn from another perspective that might shift our own to create our initiatives and create innovation in our firms.
I love that. I was just thinking while you were talking about how our team members are often closer to clients, closer to the work, maybe. And, they can see things we can't see. They hear things we aren't hearing. They're closer to each other. Sometimes conversation stops when you enter a room and your team members aren't going to say certain things in front of you necessarily. So I love this idea, Amy, of workshopping with a facilitator to get some of that feedback or get some of that learning to happen. Obviously, you can do learning through surveys and other ways to get your team to share their truth and their story and what they see. And we have to be open though to the fact that true learning is it's a little cliche or something, but it's supposed to be aha. As opposed to nah. And we have to be curious and we have to be interested and we have to be open, because some of the learning is going to be stuff we haven't seen or don't want to hear, pathways we're scared to take, that kind of thing. So I love that. I love learning from our team. I love learning from each other, our peers. I also think, part of that learning has to be, learning from others that are similar to us and listening to what they're doing. And so we've talked before in other leadership lunch chats about the importance of your peer network, getting out there to conferences, going and participating. If you're a part of an association, which at a certain size, you really got to be part of some kind of community or association at any size. Starting up, you should be part of something. So, what are peers like me doing? What are they thinking? It doesn't mean we have to do what they're doing or think like they think, but it's just a different perspective and sometimes an eye-opening one. So the peer network's super critical, finding ways to plug into that peer network, to listen to it. I want to share another thought because it's one of the big learning exercises that I do regularly, but also I did sort of like a rocket ship of this kind of learning in the last couple of years. And that's reading surveys, reading benchmark data, reading, and not just inside the profession. Yes, in profession, data is important to pay attention to. And there's all sorts of, there's benchmark surveys, inside public accounting, the Rosenberg survey, PCPS, AICPA, PCPS MAP survey. There's the CAS benchmark study by CPA.com. We do some benchmarking. Lots of people have benchmark surveys. So those are one way, but also pulse surveys, data that's supplied to us in our regular news feeds from the various publications we belong to, but also looking outside the profession and learning about what are trends in talent across the US or across the globe, or what are trends in technology inside the industries my clients are in. Just paying attention. Trends and data matter. They aren't perfectly tailored and the truth and exactly a spoonful of exactly what you need or something, but they really make you think differently, and they make you wonder why is it that way, or wonder why that's happening. And those are the kinds of things that can help inform you with your organization and your strategy, just being in tune with them. And think about consuming a study, a white paper, a report on trends inside the profession, inside your discipline, inside the industries that you serve, or just broadly across operational areas, like trends in, in billing practices across the US, not just inside public accounting, like what's happening in billing these days. Because knowing what's happening, there are always industries that are ahead of us. And there's always things happening outside of this profession that could influence us and allow you to take a leadership position in a way that, you couldn't if you only listened inside our little bubble of accounting. So I think that's another learning idea.
Yeah, I think that's so good. And also looking at perspectives that are different than your own, rather than trying to find the perspective to fight it, trying to seek to understand why there's different perspectives. I mean, even when you're making decisions about investment or acquisition or staying in independent, it's really important to look at the stories and case studies and understand from all perspectives as you're going through that discussion from others. And the other thing from others is really tapping into a peer group as well. So whether it's through an association or you create your own, there's so many flavors of it out there. But just being open to be open about your business is really important. So I think a lot of times we hold things close to the vest as if it's competitive, but it really isn't. There's no way for a business to completely copy everything that you're doing, because that would take a whole huge shift organizationally. You'd have to have the right people and experts and everything else to be able to do that. So being open about what your struggles are in your business and what things are going well, what things are not going well, you find ideas from the people around you, because they're probably experiencing pretty similar things. It's just everyone's trying to show, this perfect outside to these things. But all organizations have, their hard parts, including ours, right? Like, so it doesn't matter what you see on the outside. It's having that peer group to go to and be able to share ideas and what they're reading and seeing, and having other perspectives as well to help you in your own business.
I love that. And Amy, I want to highlight or underline the word perspective that you used, because I heard it recently juxtaposed with perception. Like they were similar but not the same. And perception is sort of what I think and filter through what I feel I know, or what I've learned, or what's happened to me in the past.
Systems. Yeah.
Pardon? Yeah.
Your belief systems. Yeah.
Yeah. And also what's happened to me in the past. That's my perception, And so I think we do a lot of leading from our perception. And in fact, I discovered this in a big way facilitating the NPAG, the National Pipeline Advisory Group, because we had to leave our biases at the door every time we talked, and we'd have to presence them and call each other on them. And, and it was funny because we told stories like they were the truth, but there wasn't necessarily, specific hard data, facts, corroborating data even, right? You could have a one-off experience, an anomaly, it's not that your experience is false. It just doesn't mean it's transferable as an idea. And so perception is, through my filters. Perspective is getting other filters to filter my ideas through and putting them on. And that's what learning's all about. Learning is all about putting on additional filters and getting this perspective and peer filters, team member filters, outside peer filters, data-based, studies, peer, those kind of filters. So if I put all these filters on, then I have a broader perspective and might be able to make better directional decisions, shift direction if necessary, with more confidence that I make that shift. So I love that. I love that word. I want to highlight another kind
of, before you shift that, I wanted to add something to that, because if we're going to be open to people's perspective, we have to prepare ourselves to not allow the defensiveness or belief systems that we have come in to that discussion. That really the learning in it is to be completely in the present moment, letting go of any past opinions or thoughts. And it does not mean you have to agree with it. And I think that's really important. But in order for us to soak something in that's someone else's perspective, we have to be open to asking questions and trying to understand that perspective from their shoes, their vantage point, so that I can really truly absorb the learning and then decide and filter what applies and what doesn't apply on my own. I don't have to fight that during that process.
I love that. I love it. So that leads me straight into where I was going, which is formal feedback. And one of the ways senior leaders can get major leaps forward in thinking and performance and make a difference is to get feedback from their team. And some of the partner groups that we encounter have never had feedback. And they might get sort of informal feedback now and then when they're talking to each other as partners or when the managing partner's talking to them, but they've never really gotten formal performance feedback or 360s or any of those kinds of things. And so I think it's really important that our listeners think about, what kind of process do I have for gathering feedback on the things I need to grow and improve on, and what my team members might want me to do more and less of, and how I could make a bigger difference for clients and all those things. What kind of feedback are we getting? And there is kind of a weird deal that we ascend to a certain level and feedback stops. So that's something else to pay attention to. And as you said, I have to be willing to hear things I might not agree with or don't want to hear. I have to let ideas soak in when I get that feedback. But I will also tell you, as somebody who delivers a ton of formal 360 feedback to leaders at all levels, from early stage career to late stage career, most people already know, but they're not really discussing it, facing it, and actioning any change. And so the process of feedback is less about surprise, here's all the stuff you didn't know, but more like, oh, here's a way of organizing it, and here's a way of prioritizing it. And these are the things that were most mentioned, and this is where I should focus. And it creates a kind of a formal process for causing the leap, the growth leap. So
I think accepting what it is, because you might know in your head, but you might be battling it in your head. I know that's what they think, but that's not right. That's not who I am. And it doesn't really matter if and it may be true, it's not who you are, but you've got to figure out the gap. It's research of what's the difference between who I think I am versus how people perceive me, coming back to perception. And how do I shift that and learn from their perspective to be able to shift it and make a change? So I just think this process of feedback is so important. And I've probably interviewed so many of our colleagues on my podcast talking about these pivots in time as leaders. Jim Metzler comes to mind. in particular, talking about the first 360 he ever received as a partner in a CPA firm, Mark Koziol, that I interviewed. And these things are so impactful of, okay, now what is my learning about myself? And this goes back to, this isn't always CPE. This is, I have to be open and vulnerable to that feedback. I mean, I was just talking to Gary Thompson on my podcast, and one of them was, that, he always had to have everything perfectly in place and scripted. And then he goes out and his communication person in the firm comes at him when he's not ready. He didn't feel his hair was in line and everything else. And then that was the communication that was the most well received by the staff in his firm than anything he had ever scripted before. And so it's really like taking the things that make you uncomfortable, and that's where the learning happens and growth happens. And there isn't a time in our career that growth can't happen. It's just allowing yourself to be open to the process of growth.
Love it. Absolutely love it. And I do. I love every bit of that story. And I love Gary. And I just think it's, like it's awesome that you're drawing those insights in your podcast. It's fantastic. So listen, we're at time, but I heard a new topic that I'm going to ask Caroline to take note of, Amy, and for you to noodle on a little bit and remind all of our listeners that we're always looking for good topics that are relevant to you and that we can all process together. So you're always welcome to share in social. But the future topic I just heard in Amy's share was perfectionistic, mindset, vulnerability. We're not perfect. Being yourself and authentic makes such a difference. People like you so much better than if you are perfect and scripted. And that's something we run into because our profession is so full of very structured perfectionists. So it's worth processing, I think, for sure. So thank you for that, Amy. And thanks everybody for this conversation today about learning as senior leaders and strategies to consider to grow and learn and to keep going. There is that concept of learning every single day until the day I die. And that's what causes you to thrive. And that's what creates energy within you and enthusiasm and excitement. And if you are in any way in a rut or sitting around being anxious, what could you learn? What could you stop and learn? Read an article, listen to a podcast. Amy's got one. Listen to other leadership lunch chats or other things, whatever. Do a little learning and see if that sparks something in you to get you out of that kind of rut. Anyway, bye for now, and we'll see you next week on Valentine's Day for another episode of Leadership Lunch Chat. Thanks, everybody.
Have a great weekend.